then the U.S. is actually going to be the swaying power to make sure the Allies win. Because as you can see with trench warfare, you might gain a mile or a couple miles of land. But the war was pretty even. Actually, the Germans are winning at first, and then the French and the the Russians start gaining. But there's no clear winner until the U.S., with all its money, machinery, and men, could push the Allies over. So again, and some of the laws that were created under the U.S. involvement in World War I were the government's conscription, which is forcing people to join the military and serve in World War I, specifically men at the age of 18 and up. And then the Espionage Act, which was kind of a interesting law, very controversial. Because if you're speaking out against the government, you could be arrested as tried as threatening to the country and not loyal to the government, as opposed, and this has some freedom of speech issues that a lot of people would take issue with today, and many people still had problems with then. So people that had different political beliefs, like socialists, communists, for example, were put in jail, not on action, but on beliefs and words. Okay, so now in this video, we're going to end the war. We're going to find out what the end of the war was and the impact of the war. So as you can see, some of the cartoons and pictures at the top, that big hall where the Treaty of Versailles, the treaty that ends the war, is going to be signed in that left-hand corner. I'm going to show you a video. I've actually been there with my wife, and we'll show you what that looks like. So the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 ends the war. So the war lasted 5 years, 1914 to 1919, and it would require the Central Powers to pay hefty reparations to the Allies. So the Allies had won, or the Triple Entente had won. Now the Central Powers are going to have to pay reparations. And even though it's spelled Versailles, V-E-R-S-A-I-L-E-S, it's actually Versailles. And you see the picture in the middle. It's a palace. It was King Louis XIV's summer home, believe it or not. It was his second palace. His first palace would have been the Louvre, which is probably the most famous museum in the world today, which is in Paris. Okay, so reparations are war damages, and the Central Powers would pay $33 billion and eliminate their armies and admit they were guilty for starting the war. So, to make things matters worse than ever, if you could imagine you owing so much money you'll probably never pay it off in your lifetime. Then you can't even have an army, and you don't know if these guys are going to invade or fight a war with you again. Doesn't matter. You're not allowed to have an army. And then finally, you have to sit there and tell the world you're the bad guy, that you're wrong, you started the war, and the Allies are the good guys. So if you could see how this makes up predictions on how this is going to set up World War II, and really World War II is just the second part of this war. They're going to take a break, and a young, actually war hero from World War I named Adolf Hitler is going to take advantage of this situation, and he's going to tell the Germans specifically, and actually he was Austrian himself, which is interesting. He's going to tell the Germans that we're not paying these reparations, and he's going to build an army. It's secretive, and then actually it's going to be pretty well known. And then we are the best. He's going to convince the Germans that Anglo-Saxons or Aryans are the purest race, and people are going to be accepting of these ideas because you could imagine what would this do to the U.S. economy if we had to pay $33 billion in their time? We're talking probably over $1 trillion in our money. We had no army, so we never felt safe, and then we had to admit guilt for something that really was a shared guilt. All right, so my wife's going to show you what the Hall of Mirrors, the famous place that the Treaty of Versailles is signed, looks like. And actually, it's on a side note, Kim Kardashian and Kanye West are getting married there. It's considered one of the most beautiful halls or rooms in the world, and it's in the Treaty or Versailles Palace. That's where the treaty was signed in 1919. So let's take a look at this and write down, make sure you understand the treaty. Okay, here she goes. Camera action. Camera action.
Welcome to the Palace of Versailles, location where the Treaty of Versailles was signed, which ended World War I. If you look at all of its glory, you can see that right here is what ended World War I.
And you can see there's just tons of people in this room. It's unbelievable. It is probably the second most beautiful room I've ever been to, other than the Sistine Chapel, which just blew my mind. I'm going to do a panoramic view. I'm going to turn the camera 360 to show you what the whole room looks like in this next video. Enjoy. And here we go. And I hope you're enjoying Dr. Metropoulos. She's your tour guide. My wife is doing a great job.
Okay. This is Louis XIV's famous Hall of Mirrors. Every patient there designed the light make each place as well as in the mirror. From here you'll see how the light comes in the room. You'll also see how everywhere from the opulence
I did a real quick history on the Palace of Versailles. Interesting facts. The Palace of Versailles cost France almost half the money in the entire country. And this is when Louis XIV was in charge of France. And if you can imagine, France was the most powerful country at the time. And if you use half of all the revenue of America, the government used half the money in our country to build the White House, it's going to cause a lot of poverty in the rest of the country. And one of the reasons for the French Revolution is going to be that you have this palace that's just so opulent, it's so amazingly beautiful, but it costs tons of money. You can see the ceilings are hand painted. Those gold statues behind my wife are actually fake, but they were real at one time. And when the French stormed the palace and they're going to kill Louis XIV's grandson, cut his head off, and the princesses, they're going to take all of the gold and a lot of stuff out of the palace. Paintings and stuff may be original, but a lot of the gold and crystal is missing. All right, so let's end World War I and see what happens. So the end of the impact. Now, the man in the left-hand corner, that is Woodrow Wilson, President 28. Wilson's the one that promised that he was not going to get us into World War I, and he did. We went into World War I because of the sinking of Lusitania, and we were smuggling arms to the British. And the German U-boats claim that there were weapons in the bottom of the Lusitania. That's why it was an open target. And it just happened that American citizens were on that boat. So the war ends. America helps tip the scale, and the Allies win the war. So U.S. President Woodrow Wilson would push to create what's called the League of Nations. And this is a very innovative and ingenious idea. League being a group of nations. So he wanted to bring all the nations together in the world under one banner of peace. So in 1990, he proposed this. The interesting fact about this is while most countries, the superpowers after World War I, did not want to see another World War I, and they signed on to this, the leading player, Woodrow Wilson of the United States, was the main government that refused to sign this. And without U.S. back support of the League of Nations, it's going to collapse. It's not going to last very long at all. And then finally, the League of Nations was created to help prevent peace and prevent future wars. Here's a quick quiz question. So what organization is used to keep world peace today that still does exist? Take a second. And that would be the United Nations. So we do current events. We talk about the United Nations. The United Nations was created in 1949 after World War II and has existed ever since. And if you'd like to learn more about that, you can come talk to me or come talk to our Model United Nations students at the school. They will give you as much information you'd like. And if you're interested in humanitarian issues, that's what we deal with in the Model UN, where we act out and come out with resolutions or, as you know, ways of solving real-world problems like starvation, overpopulation, the pandemics and AIDS and other diseases, and how to prevent wars like civil war in Syria and Iraq and so forth and so on. So I want you to understand that the war does not end well for the Central Powers. It creates a lot of hostility and anger, which could very quickly turn into a World War II. And because of the reparations that paying out all this money, that's going to destroy and hurt the economies of Germany and Austria-Hungary. and there's going to be big consequences and a buildup of anger and frustration and animosity towards France and Britain, America, and the Allied powers. All right, guys, take care. I hope you enjoyed.